This is one in a series of videos that explores the 6 essential components of Colorado's multi-tiered system of supports, or MTSS. These 6 components support the Colorado Department of Education's goal of every student, every step of the way. To improve student outcomes for every student, we implement a successful MTSS framework, which is dependent on the effective interaction of data used for decision-making, evidence-based practices that support student need, and systems that facilitate adult implementation of practices. Notice how the circles overlap and are integrated. These integrated supports lead to the improved student outcomes of social competence and academic achievement. Within the component of universal screening and progress monitoring, we are considering some data sets that can contribute to the effective integration of supports. Let's start with universal screening. Universal screening is defined as a type of assessment that is characterized by the administration, usually 3 times a year, of quick, low-cost, repeatable data collection of academic and behavioral skills of all students. It shows how functional the curriculum and instruction are in the school and detects whether or not students are making acceptable progress in the curriculum. Progress monitoring is a systematic approach to gathering academic and behavioral data using a variety of data collection methods. Student performance is examined frequently, over time, to evaluate response to instruction and intervention.
One thing that's important about multi-tiered systems of support is that the problem-solving model tries to do a preventative-based approach to problem-solving, meaning that we try to look at data early so that we find patterns that indicate problems are likely or do exist. And when we do that, we do 2 important parts. One is what we call universal screening, which is to check on a regular basis, quarterly, semi-annually, at the end of the year, to see how things are going. We also do something called progress monitoring. And progress monitoring has a really important function, which is, can we tweak what we're doing to make it more efficient, use our resources better? Also, can we do a fewer amount of things to have the same effect? And that's important because we have to also think about adding on new interventions as new problems occur. So you can't continually say, well, we're just going to add on more. We've got to actually say how we're going to be more efficient with what we're doing now, because we're always going to have to look at other activities to direct our resources to.
Universal screening is considered to be the best practice for assessing students at the school-wide level. The purpose is to identify students who may need additional supports. Data from universal screening will provide information about the difference between students' current and expected levels of performance. This applies to students who may need acceleration and enrichment as much as students who might be struggling and need support to reach proficiency. Progress monitoring is used in conjunction with universal screening. It is a research-based practice that regularly, weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly measures students' academic or behavioral progress in order to evaluate the effectiveness of teaching practices and to make informed instructional decisions. The same tool is used over time. It is administered in consistent increments, and progress monitoring is done more frequently with the intensity of the intervention. For example, the top graph depicts a student's response to a reading intervention over a period of weeks. In the second graph, a student's progress is monitored with implementation of a behavior intervention called Check-in, Check-out, or CICO. It shows the number of times the student was able to earn at least 80% of his points for his behavior goals.
So for example, in my wife's school, they look at their discipline data on a monthly basis, and they try to look for patterns that indicate that problems might be there or might be becoming a significant problem. They look at their data patterns, they try to identify what are the factors that contribute to the problem or might contribute to a future problem. They then take that information to say, what's the best intervention that aligns with trying to solve that problem? And then they try to predict how likely that intervention is going to work or not. Then they take the intervention back and say, let's make sure our staff are prepared to implement that intervention with fidelity. Because just because you select the intervention doesn't mean that it's going to work. You want to make sure that it's contextualized to the place it's going to be applied. It also could occur at grade level team meetings, for example. And the grade level team meetings might get together, and the first thing they pop up is their literacy data, for example, and they throw that on the table and they say, here's how our kids are doing over the last 6 weeks. And I'll use a very concrete example. We might have a school that uses a curriculum-based measurement system like Ames Web or Dibbles or something, and they say, 45% of our kids are reading at benchmark right now on this particular skill, but we have a few kids right now that are not. So then they use that information at the grade level team meeting to say, how do we tweak our lesson plans for teaching reading?
We use data to start the problem-solving process. Universal screening and progress monitoring data can be used to initiate the process. Problem-solving consists of 4 steps: define, analyze, implement, and evaluate. Problem-solving can be applied at the student, classroom, building, district, and system levels.
I think teachers now benefit from the fact that when we put a benchmark in the system that we want the child to be to in maybe 3 weeks, we know exactly where that is, and it'll graph it for us, and they can look at it and move the child on in the next 3 weeks to the next data point. So I think it's making sure that we look at a large variety of data for a child, but also hone in on the specific benchmarks we want our children to get and progress monitor those.
When looking at data, we will be looking for the change in performance over time. If the response is poor, check for fidelity of implementation and re-enter the problem-solving process. If the response is questionable, also check for fidelity of implementation. If needed, increase the intensity of the current intervention for a short period of time and assess impact. If the response is positive, continue intervention until reaching the desired target or benchmark. Consider fading the intervention to determine if functional independence has been acquired.
I know at the elementary level, we're very nurturing. We want them to feel good. Look, they're doing well. Why would we take that away? Well, they're ready, and look what the data says. So really making sure we're paying attention to our timelines and our post-assessments and whether we met our goals or not, and then creating a new plan for that child who has been successful and met their goal with that intervention.
So with a district leadership team, what you are looking at is not only are the students making adequate gains academically, is it safe? Are there safe environments for the students to be successful? Are teachers implementing the practices in the manner that they should be? And then are we providing proper supports? So at a district, we are looking at each of those items, and then it is the work of the district team to really say, if we're not getting the outcomes we want, if we're not getting student outcomes, what do we need to do to change that? If we're not getting teachers to implement the practices well, what can we do to really support those teachers so they're more effective?
So districts and schools need to be able to monitor both fidelity and outcomes. And the reason they need to monitor both fidelity and outcomes is if we're not getting the student outcomes we hoped for, and we don't have a fidelity measure which says, are we doing what we said we would do, really, there's no logical continuous improvement strategy. We didn't get the students' outcomes that we were hoping for. Now, does that mean we chose wrong? We picked a poor instructional approach for our students? Or does that mean we didn't implement well? The students never got the instructional approach. If I don't have fidelity data or performance assessment data, I can't make the judgment. And then I don't know how to engage in improvement strategies. If I don't get great results and I'm not implementing well, then I can go back to those implementation drivers and say, how can we choose teachers better? How can we train them better and provide more professional development for them that's based on evidence-based professional development? How can we coach them more or better so that we get the bump in fidelity? Let's first do it right. Let's show that we can do it and then look at our outcomes. If we have high fidelity and we're still not getting good student outcomes, then our work is to dig deeper around for whom are we not getting good outcomes? What does the literature say? Do we need to choose differently? In a multi-tiered system of supports, are we moving students into the right level of support? Is that our problem rather than choosing the curriculum? You're just asking a different set of continuous improvement, continuous quality improvement questions, but without fidelity measures, I honestly don't know how you engage in meaningful continuous quality improvement.
So the quick way to think about it is we use data to define the problem, we use that information to pick the intervention, we make sure the staff are prepared to implement the intervention with fidelity, we monitor implementation on a regular basis to make sure it's working at the kid level and also at the staff level, and we tweak on a regular basis to make sure we're being efficient in the implementation. And that's pretty common across the academic side or the behavior side, because we want to make sure we're making good decisions around the interventions.